FSSC 22000, ISO 22000, HACCP, and ISO 9001 management systems comes to us from Chad Kymal. Chad is the CTO and founder of Omnex Inc., an international consulting, training, and software organization headquartered in the United States. He previously worked at General Motors and KPMG before founding Omnex in 1986. He has served on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners and has received numerous quality achievement awards, including the Quality Professional of the Year Award by the American Society for Quality's Automotive Division in 2005. He holds both a master's degree in industrial and operations engineering, as well as an MBA from the University of Michigan. Omnex has been involved in innovation of the application of HACCP using failure mode and effects analysis and control plans with integrated quality and food safety. Omnex implements customer-focused key measurables, phase-gate new product development, integrated food quality, environmental, and health and safety management systems, and disciplined problem-solving methods in organizations which produce food. Chad is a registered lead auditor who has conducted hundreds of audits, including multiple audits in food safety management systems. He is HACCP and SQF GFSI certified and has published numerous papers and 3 books on management system standards and quality. And with that, take it away, Chad.
Thank you very much. Folks, thanks to Exemplar. I'm very happy to join this conference on Food Safety Expo. So let us spend the next hour on this topic of implementing integrated FSSC 22000. Now I have to tell you this, you could definitely implement, this presentation is about implementing FSSC 22000 and ISO 9001. Very easily, I could have told you about integrating not only the QMS, which is ISO 9001, ISO 14001, that is the Environmental Management System, ISO 45001, the Health and Safety Management System, and of course, the food safety. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I did a webinar on this very topic a little while ago. So let's get started now on FSSC 22000, HACCP, and ISO 9001. So I'll just mention to you that this presentation is broken into 2 parts. In the very first half, I'm going to talk to you about FSSC 22000 and the ISO 22000 that's incorporated into FSSC 22000 and something called FSSC 22000Q, which is the program by the FSSC 22000 nonprofit organization that runs the FSSC 22000. They have a scheme for ISO, QMS and food safety. So that's the first half. Let's call it part A. The part B of this presentation, and if you want to, we just want to let you know, you can view it for half an hour, then view the second half, which is all about best-in-class systems and 0 defects. Okay, so let's get started. A little bit about Omnex. We were founded in 1985. We're headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we're 700 people globally, and we work with all different management systems, including food safety. So really, I would like to say the forte of Omnex is, a couple of things. One is integrated management systems. Second is the idea of best in class. And then I would say specifically, if you're looking for ways to become 0 defects, well, this is something we have done in multiple different industries, and we'll be happy to talk to you about how to get that done. All right. This is the agenda here for the part A of the presentation, which will start with the GFSI, or the Global Food Safety Initiative. Very importantly, I wanted you to know FSSC 22000 is part of 10 or 15 different GFSI standards similar to SQF or BRC. Three of these standards, SQF, BRC, and FSSC, are the three most popular food safety standards. And only FSSC 22000, most importantly, incorporates ISO 22000 in its entirety, making that very important for all of us who try to implement integrated management systems. I'll try to explain that a little bit later. So third, then, we'll be talking about ISO 22000 and something called a high-level structure. And last, the US government has passed the Food Safety Act, Modernization Act, and along with it, a certification program, for those who are in food safety called PCQI. So we'll talk all about that in the very end of Part A. All right, then, let's get right to it. What is this FSSC 22000 2018-Q? Well, let me wait and explain that to you in a second. Before we get there, let's spend a few minutes understanding where this GFSI standard came from. And I'll tell you this. So it comes from the Consumer Goods Forum, which is made up of the largest retailers, manufacturers, and service providers in the world. So back in, what year was that? It was 2001. That's the Consumer Goods Forum. But the GFSI was an initiative by the largest retailers who wanted to ensure quality in the supply chain, food safety in the supply chain. And this program was adopted by them and is administered by them. And, some of the largest retailers made it a requirement. And because they made it a requirement, just about everybody in the industry is GFSI certified. And as I mentioned to you, it's about 15, 16 different standards and includes BRC, SQF, and FSSC 22000. There's a lot more I could tell you about GFSI, but let's move on. So here's very importantly, the US government passed the Food Safety Modernization Act, and there's a document explaining and comparing those requirements to show it's all in FSSC 22000. In the FSSC 22000, you have the plain food safety certification scheme. That's FSSC 22000. There is a scheme which is lower with minimum requirements. So, manufacturers and retailers came to, FSSC 22000 and asked them, hey, how about a easier standard to conform to for in our global markets? Can you design something for us? And so there is something for the global markets called FSSC 22000 Global Markets. Sorry, FSSC Global Markets. Of course, there's a third standard, FSSC 22000Q, and I'll explain that to you in 1 second. So what is this FSSC 22000 scheme? Well, let me just say that as we discuss the scheme, we'll start with the benefits of FSSC 22000. Folks, really, this is the big deal about FSSC 22000. It uses independent international standards. BRC and SQF writes their own standards. Of course, they have experts who write them, but they write all their standards, whereas FSSC 22000 uses international standards like ISO 22000. There's more, but I'll tell you that in a second. And they have a certification scheme they call the Integrity Program. And of course, I am not sure if FSSC 22000 is now the #1 globally accepted, program for food safety. And I can tell you the reason for it is they adopted ISO 22000 in its midst. In fact, it was designed like that from the initial get-go. And ISO 22000 is very important because you're using the International Standardization Organization, who writes ISO 9001, ISO 14001, and ISO 45001. The same organization writes ISO 22000. Hence, the idea of using the same registrar, the same scheme to do the certification. All right. What is FSSC 22000? How do I get certified to FSSC 22000? Well, to do that, you need to do 3 different standards have to be accommodated. The predominant one is ISO 22000. And then if you go to that website, you will see there's some additional requirements called the FSSC 22000 requirements. This is not, a huge number of requirements. It's a handful of 5 or 6 requirements added on and tacked on to ISO 22000. Of course, the big deal is in what we call prerequisite programs, or PRPs. Depending on the industry you are in, retailer, logistics, manufacturer, there are different PRPs that you have to use, which I'll talk to you in 1 second. And you'll ask the question, where is HACCP? Well, HACCP is built into ISO 22000. So what is FSSC? FSSC is ISO 22000, PRPs, and FSSC 22000 requirements. And of course, since this whole presentation is about integration of quality, there's one additional scheme, which is the FSSC 22000Q, which includes ISO 9001, which is the topic of this presentation. Folks, here are the PRPs. Everything from manufacturers in -1, 22002-1, all the way to past 221 for retailers. And if you wonder what is NTA 8059, it's logistics. So I'll just tell you this. Omnex had the opportunity to work with one of the largest manufacturers in the world. I don't know if they're the largest or the second largest manufacturer in the world. This was a few years ago when FSSC 22000 first came out. And they had decided they're going to integrate in FSSC 22000, ISO 14001, ISO 9001, and ISO 45001. Of course, they had an internal standard that's, for quality. And ISO 45000 at that time was an old standard called OSHA's 18001. And yes, we could integrate standards. We could integrate all 4 of those standards for them, and we did the entire Americas for them. 1 or 2 years later, the logistics and warehouse came and talked to us. At that time, we did not have a PRP for logistics and the warehouse, so that was a huge problem. So the good news, fast forward to today, the good news is that, FSSC 22000 has been increasing that scope, not only to transportation, to retailers, and so on. Here it is. Here's the entire scheme, from farming of animals to manufacturing of food products, all the way to retail and wholesale. Let me tell you, we actually, the biggest number of people, of companies, organizations we helped is food packaging and manufacturing. That was the biggest, brunt of the work we did in FSSC 22000. Just Keep going. So really, this is a graphical view of the FSSC 22000 showing you the three major ingredients making up FSSC 22000. And then we look to the next part of it is you see when you include ISO 9001, you have a scheme called FSSC 22000Q. Since I've already talked to you about all of this is old hat, but it's good to reinforce the idea that yes, indeed, FSSC 22000 has a scheme that includes FSSC 22000, which is food safety, and the quality management system, which is ISO 9001. You know, I sometimes I'm not sure if I get to speak all the different things I want to talk about. So let me just say this right now. When Omnex implements FSSC 22000, I tell top management and the implementation team I'm working with, look, you can get quality, implement quality for almost free. Folks, the processes for food safety and quality are so, of course, they're different. No, I mean, processes aren't different. Food quality and safety are different, but the processes to implement it inside your organization is very, very, very similar. In fact, it's the same for the biggest part. And even for HACCP, I'll talk to you about integrated risk in part B. For HACCP, we implement a FMEA type HACCP, and we integrate in quality into that HACCP, and then something called a control plan to capture the CCPs that go into the inspection sheets of the operator or the inspector to control food safety and quality. Folks, that idea and that methodology is the key to zero defects. But let me wait to talk to you about that in the next section. All right then, what is this FSSC 22000-Q? What can you do with this? Well, first of all, number one, you have to implement it. If you do implement an integrated system, the registrar that's certified by FSSC 22000, which is based out of, it's a nonprofit based out of Netherlands, they will come in and do the folks who come won't be from Netherlands, it'll be from a registrar certified in the US, was certified through the FSSC 22000. Same as Omnex, we're a training provider certified through FSSC 22000. But the registrar or auditors who are certified through FSSC will come in and do an integrated audit for FSSC 22000 and ISO 9001. And they're just telling you a couple of things. Look, only organizations who have already got food safety can obtain the -Q. Next, they're saying the registrar must be accredited for both ISO 9001 and FSSC 22000 by the body in the Netherlands. And you can get a second certificate that says -Q on it. That's what they mean by this slide that came right out of FSSC 22000. Folks, we're going to segue now. That's all I have on FSSC 22000. I started with the GFSI, to make sure you understand that. And then I ended by telling you all about FSSC 22000 and also to tell you there's a scheme to integrate food safety and quality. All right. As you recall, there are three important ingredients that makes up FSSC 22000, and the biggest one and the largest part of it is ISO 22000. And this ISO 22000 got updated in 2018, and then FSSC 22000 in turn got updated in 2019. So here we are in January of 2020. This is brand new, folks, and this is the standard you need to if you ask me, FSSC 22000 is the standard to implement. What about ISO 22000? Just to remind you, if you just get ISO 22000, the food safety, it's not food safety forum, the forum is actually out of Paris, where all the members are. They won't be happy. It's not GFSI certified. In fact, ISO 22000 first went and tried to get, become a GFSI standard by themselves. And they were not allowed to be a GFSI standard. They got turned down because the verdict of the examiners who examined the standard for equivalency is what they do. They said, look, you don't have PRPs. So immediately, a nonprofit of the name FSSC 22000 in the Netherlands looked at other international standards, and they picked up what is called PAS standards, or publicly available standards from BSI that had prerequisites, and they brought it in. So initially they were all PAS standards when we helped implement ISO FSSC 22000, and then slowly they became ISO 22002 standards, okay? Making it a part of the ISO 22000 family, so that all the ingredients, main ingredients of FSSC 22000 were all international standards. Okay. So a couple of things. It's not GFSI certified. It does not fall under the FSSC 22000 program, certification program owner. In ISO 22000, they're saying PRPs are not mandatory, and it doesn't fall under the certification scheme. They're just telling you, hey, don't think you just need ISO 22000. You need us. You need FSSC 22000. All right, that's what they're saying. So you may be wondering, what is this international standardization organization? Who are these ISO folks? Let me just tell you, I myself I'm on the QMS, EMS, and OSHA's committees. I help write ISO 9001, ISO 14001, and the health and safety, which is ISO 45001. Okay, so you can, so these are standards, and I'm the US, I'm part of the US TAG, or Technical Advisory Group, TAG, and groups of us work with all the other countries to write these standards. And that's how this ISO 22000 series got written. Who's the technical committee for this? TC34. All right. So quality is TC 176. So you can tell very clearly, food was formed way before quality was formed in the ISO, technical subcommittees. All right. What else do we know? We know, because of the rules of ISO, that the ISO 22000 and hence FSSC 22000 and 22002, 3, 4, 5, all the prerequisite programs, all of them get updated by, as a rule, every 5 years. You won't start bang every 5 years. It'll be 5 plus 2, 3 years for a standard to get released. Okay. So you have the TC34 writing these standards and bringing them up to industry standards. So here's what they say 22,000 is. This 22,000 2018, the latest revision. What is it? It's an international independent standard voted on by all the different countries that makes up ISO. It's a standard not for food, but a food safety management system. That's a big deal. It's a management system. It's for the entire food chain. It's not just for manufacturers. It's not just for retailers. It was developed for the entire supply chain. It includes HACCP in it. It's state of the art, focuses on supply chain assurance. And most importantly, by the edict of ISO, it follows something called the high level structure, which I'll talk to you about, which makes it standardized with other ISO standards. I'll explain to you what that means. And then aligned with the Codex Alimentarius, which is the HACCP standard, and it's part of the 22,000 family of standards. So let us look at this family of standards. So you see here, you have 2018, which is requirements, or in ISO speak and auditor speak, we say shalls. And then you have a guideline on the application of it, which you can look at it. It's a guideline is usually, not usually, it's a should, or it's recommended, and you can use it to understand maybe a little bit more detail of the requirements, guidance on the standard itself. Then you see a traceability standard, and then you see the entire list of 1 through 6, the PRPs, or the prerequisites. The prerequisites, folks, are all about how should the food table be. Should be that it shouldn't be porous. That's not the right word to use, but that it shouldn't there shouldn't be any debris or cobwebs or anything else like that over the food preparation area. There shouldn't be any corners where food could accumulate. Where should the drains be located? How should water be? How should the air be? All that is covered in the prerequisites, which of course, those of you listening in know are part of the prerequisite programs. And then of course, in the very end, you see the requirements for audit and certifications bodies. And this is a supplement to a standard called ISO 17021 that registrars have to follow. But this 22003 gives additional detailed requirements for how to figure out number of days for an audit and so on. I have done training for a couple of different registrars and the registration bodies when they initially got started. And we also trained them in 14,001 and 9,001 just to help them understand how to audit these integrated standards. So here it is, the high-level structure. This high-level structure comes out of a requirement in the, I think they call it the TMB, and I have to remember what the TMB stands for. It's a higher level group in the ISO body that lays out the Annex SL, which is undergoing revision right now, lays out the requirements. And one of the requirements is said because of deproliferation, meaning folks who had to implement standards were quite concerned that ISO 9001 read differently. ISO 22,000 read differently. ISO 14,001 read differently. And, for us folks who spend our lives reading standards, understanding standards, we don't have a difficulty. But the common layperson out there who is trying to implement these standards had an incredibly difficult time. So they said, hey, all the different management system standards have to follow this structure. This is the structure you're seeing right now, from scope all the way to improvement. Every standard from FSSC ISO 22,000 to 9,001 to 14,001 to 45,001 to 27,001, which is IT security. All of them follow this high-level structure, and the definitions are the same. Of course, there's right now a big tussle and a big argument going on in terms of whether the definition of risk should be the same between all the different standards. I have my opinion, but I'll just keep it to myself. And just to tell you then, this high-level structure big deal is that for implementers of integrated management systems, ISO 22,000 and ISO 9001 having the same structure and the same definitions help us easily understand what to do. So, got a couple more slides, and then we'll be done with this first section, which is part A. And in this section is just to talk to you about key changes in ISO 22000 that came out in 2018. So here is then a summary of the key changes to ISO 22000. Coming from the high-level structure, ISO 22000 has adopted the idea of context, interested party expectations, 4142, and its impact on risks and opportunities in 6.1. So this whole idea of risk or risk-based thinking is new to food safety. The idea of context is new. The idea of interested party expectations are new. For those of us who have been implementing now since 2016, because ISO 9001 came out in 2016, this is not new. We're now used to implementing 4142 and 6.1, and very easily, food safety could integrate with that. What do we know about a risk? We know there's two types of risk. In 6.1, you can see that the kind of risk in terms of not meeting objectives, and then there's a second operational risk, which is spelled out by HACCP, right? 6.1. All right, and then in the middle there, you have the idea of the food safety management system. In 4.4 in ISO 9001, it talks about the process approach. So really, it is good to integrate the food safety into the process approach to ensure that the food safety controls are put into the business processes of the organization where it belongs, okay? And also the idea of food safety policy addressing the context of the organization and the strategic direction of the organization. So what do we have here in risk-based thinking? This is one of the big running changes for food safety. You have this organizational risk, which I mentioned to you, and the HACCP, the hazard analysis, okay? And this is a process Omnex uses. And why do I have this process here for you? I do talk about it as part of our best in class. And just to tell you that when you implement the standard clauses, you need to be thinking process. This is a process we wrote actually for Ford Motor Company many years ago and helped Ford implement it with a supply base. This process is about how to run your organization with KPIs, okay? So context, interested party expectations, just 4.1 and 4.2, along with the mission, vision, policies are used to set your goals and objectives, which are food safety goals and objectives, quality goals and objectives, and organizational objectives, right? So when we try to implement standards, we don't try to just conform to these standards. We try to make the organization better. So here's one of the best-in-class ideas from Omnex, the idea of setting goals and objectives, which are quote-unquote the intended results in 6.1. And we measure these goals and objectives for key performance indicators. So most importantly, from this process, what Omnex tries to say is that you can't get results, which are the key performance indicators. What you can, you cannot influence results. Results are a result. What you can influence are the processes that affect the results. So the key processes that affect the KPI are the ones we try to measure and improve. All right. So please dwell on those words. A very important process in the organization for managing the organization and also integrating all the different management system standards. Why? Where am I going next? The idea of leadership responsibilities, which is brand new to food safety. So what we have is that top management needs to understand and participate in this business operating system that I talked to you about. In fact, the standard says they are accountable for the food safety management systems. By the way, we all knew that. Very happy to see in the standard that auditors need to ensure that the top management is very involved in setting up the risk-based thinking, in setting up the business operating system that I just talked to you about, that they understand processes and the process approach, they understand the risk-based thinking, the food safety metrics, what are the highest risk. I might just ask top management, what is the highest risk process for food safety in your organization? If I was doing ISO 9001, I could ask the same about quality. If I was doing ISO 9001, I may ask them also about customer satisfaction. Okay. All right. So the idea of leadership responsibilities in FSSC 22000 coming from ISO 22000. Folks, we'll finish up this section by talking to you about PCQI programs, which are a requirement coming from the US government as part of the food, food safety preventive, this training comes from FSPCA. The preventive controls of a human food course was developed by them, and there needs to be qualified individuals in every organization according to the Food Modernization Act. And what do they need to oversee? Preparation of the food safety plan, validation of the preventive controls, records review, reanalysis of the food safety plan. So the Food Safety Modernization Act and PCQI mandate several things, and that all food facilities need to implement a preventive controls plan from this certified individual, who has gone through this training. And it says what the preventive control plan needs to do is evaluation of the food safety hazards, steps and controls to prevent those hazards, a system to monitor the controls, routine records, and a recall plan. And what you do see here is the integration of this preventive controls plan with the HACCP. So indeed, what Omnex recommends is integrating the two. Okay, so with that, that's the end of part A, and we are now going to start part B. So what do we see then in part B? What is the topic of part B? The topic of part B is best-in-class food safety and quality integrated systems. And an important part of that, which I think is key for all of us, practicing food safety and also practicing quality, that we have a food safety and quality zero defects program. So let's try to figure out what that means. So this comes right out of my book that I wrote, and I've been around for a long time, and I think Mike used an older bio of myself. I have 6 books that I've written. My last book came out in 2016, and it spoke about the integration of 9001, 14001, and 45001. In fact, when I wrote it, the health and safety standard was still 18001. And and I wrote 5 case studies. I presented 5 case studies. We have done hundreds of integrated management systems, folks. And we included 5 case studies, including a food case study. So one of the things you'll see I've written many papers on this subject of integrated management systems. It's a key area of research. Now, so I do want to say one more thing before I talk to you about what is an integrated management system. That, since 2006, I've had the chance to talk to people and talk about the integration of QMS, EMS, and OHS. And if you are a food company, the integration of food safety, QMS, EMS, and OSHAs. Well, folks, now we've upped the ante. You know, IT security and cybersecurity has become a key area. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you best in class included IT security, ISO 27001, and social responsibility. And you will see one of the 4 pillars, of the food forum included sustainability, and this ISO 26000 guidance standard is a good guide for implementing social responsibility. All right, now let's get to the definition that I defined in the book, that an integrated management system is made up of integrated processes. Folks who are listening in should know what is meant by a process map. ISO 9001 does not require it, but the sequence and interaction of processes we typically document in a process map. So integrated process then integrates the business, it shows the processes of the organization in a process map, and we integrate in the requirements of food safety and quality into the same processes of the organization. That pillar is called integrated processes. Then what else do we have? Omnex uses an integrated risk process with HACCP for quality, environmental, health and safety, and IT security. And that's what we call integrated risk. And that's the second pillar. The third pillar, of course, is the idea of doing integrated audits. As you may or may not know, that largest manufacturer that implemented QMS, EMS, OSHAs many years ago, and food safety many years ago, we wrote integrated lead auditor classes at that time for that organization. So, of course, with the high-level structure now, integrated audits are possible and they're recommended. Let me just say one thing before we go. You cannot do integrated audits of a system, management system, that does not have integrated processes. All right. Frequently, when we are called for integration, they immediately want to start doing integrated audits, but you can't do it if the management system is not integrated. So here's the idea of this process map. Here is a picture of the process map, shows you pictorially how all the processes of the organization interact, and then we can color, food versus, you can have a little explanation, which are the processes integrated, which are the processes only food, and which are the processes only quality. Okay, and that's what we would say, integrated process. Next is the integrated risk. The idea is using the same. So one of the things we have to realize, risk is always severity times occurrence. You can call severity impact if you want. You can call occurrence likelihood if you want. But risk is always the severity of the impact, likelihood occurrence. And then, of course, you have the idea of controls. And when you have controls, it's the residual risk. And typically, they put a number for the controls. They put a number for the severity of impact, a number for the likelihood occurrence, and they put a number for the control, and they multiply it out, and you get residual risk. If you just multiply severity times occurrence, you get total risk without the control. All right. Sometimes both of them are important, and you can do the same methodology and teach the same common methodology to a team to do food safety risk using HACCP and the quality risk using this, what we call FMEA type, HACCP type form. Okay. Now, what's the big deal? Why would I want to have the same methodology? The big deal is if you don't have some common basis for severity times risk, and if it doesn't go 1 through 10 or 1 through 5, you cannot compare the risk numbers. Why the heck you do these things is to be able to say in such and such a facility, these are the top risks. Boss, globally, these are the risks. If you don't know what you're doing on that, then it's a waste of money. That's why you want to do integrated risk. And then, of course, you want to do integrated audits. Why integrated audits? It saves money, it saves time. And for those listening in on the third party, the rule of thumb is a 20% reduction in the price or the time of standalone audits when you integrate two systems. Of course, certain schemes like automotive, IATF 16949 don't allow it. And as I speak, when I last checked, I didn't see the same in AS 9100 aerospace. So what are we trying to do with integration? I'll just digress for a second. I'm part of the rewrite of the ISO 10013, which is documented information. So since much of the people in the audience here are third party auditors, you all know what is ISO 10013. I myself ran a registrar for about 11 years, and I actually helped write the quality management system for the registrar. We actually set that up in the 1994 timeframe, and back then ISO 10013 was just for quality manuals. Can you imagine that? Fast forward, it's about the documented information, and I'll say this as the US expert on the ISO 10013 writing committee, that this type of a 4-tier structure is not required. So when we show this just to explain integration. So using this documentation pyramid, you can see here that there is a manual at the very top. It's an integrated manual. Since we're only talking Q and FS, food safety and FSMS and quality, the Apex document, typically called a manual, for ISO 9001 is called a quality manual. You can call it a food safety and quality manual at the Apex document. So what it has then is a process map in it, and then each of those processes are shown down below in what we call the level 2. Okay, so when we implement this, we like to do a flow chart. I started out by doing a flow chart, or Omnex, in 1995. We started out doing flow charts and verbiage or writing documents, both of them explaining the process or the procedure. Today, we just go with flow charts that say who, what, when. Integrated work instructions, for the most part, folks, are the food safety and quality work instructions on the shop floor. All right, telling operators how to run their machines and how to get quality and food safety in there. And it's risk-based, which I'll explain to you in the best-in-class zero defects program that I'm going to talk to you about. And then you have forms and checklists, level 4. And the way I like to explain this to people is a process map gets decomposed into flow charts that get decomposed into work instructions, and then as you do work, your forms and checklists that turn into records. Okay. All right. What this says is this company is not integrated, not standardized. So here you have plant 1. It's got a food safety program run by the food safety people, environmental or the sanitation folks, the EMS by the environmental management system by another group, quality by another group. Typically 14,001 and 45,001 management gives to the same person. Don't know why. They go by titles, I think, and they randomly decided to do that. Of course, why is this a problem? There's multiple processes that do the same thing. So you see 4 training documents, 4 management reviews, 4 auditing processes, 4 of each. And folks, very inherently, what is the word? Wasteful. In fact, it's a tremendous cost to the organization. So that's the idea of integration. What is the lack of standardization? Lack of standardization is plant 1, plant 2, plant 3, sales, warehouse. All of them have written different processes, whether it's for management review, to internal audits, to context and interested party expectations. Everybody is doing everything different in this large organization where everybody should be doing everything the same way. So very, very wasteful. Lack of standardization, lack of integration. So from there, what do we want to do? Oop, that's my book. That's the book by ASQ that tells you how to go from that into an integrated management system, which was the picture of the pyramid on a previous slide. All right, folks. I'd like to think, we all try to accomplish and, do meaningful things in our lives. So what we have tried to do here at Omnex is not just implement and get a certificate, because you can do that, but you might end up adding cost if you don't take it in the right spirit. What is the right spirit? Implementing best-in-class systems so you can save money as you try to implement FSSC 22000 or ISO 9001, both which have changed. So what do these characteristics and what are the building blocks of best-in-class companies? Number one is the integrated processes, integrated risk, integrated audits. All right. Number two, going into the manufacturing plant floor and doing with cross-functional teams, doing process flow. Sorry, these are teams on the shop floor is who we'd like to work with for zero defects. And we do a process flow, which is important for HACCP and quality. We do a PFMEA HACCP and something called a control plan, which is a precursor to an inspection plan that the operator uses. But the control plan is a management tool that documents all the controls that need to be then controlled by the operator, jobs, the setup person, or in maintenance. Okay, so from this risk process comes the work instruction for control on the shop floor. So this is what Omnex uses along with an 8D system for our zero defects program. And guaranteed, this is what we have accomplished in multiple different industries, from semiconductors to automotive to aerospace. All right. And food. Now, what is next? Using that BOSS process for implementing KPIs with an integrated BOSS for quality and food safety that aligns key performance indicators with the organizational objectives to context and interested party expectations. And last, highly recommend software today with what we call electronic workflows. So you'll see the idea of electronic workflows show up in ISO 10013 as a way to document processes. So let's talk about these 4 different best-in-class ideas. I already covered integrated processes, integrated risk, and integrated audits in the last section. The second part to this best-in-class is about getting to zero defects with this integrated tool that we use, that we call process review internally at Omnex. One of the things, of course, we highly recommend is a phase gate new product development process. In some in automotive and aerospace, they call it APQP. But APQP is just a phase gate new product development process from planning, product design, product and process validation. So we highly believe either in a first article or a PPAP. If you want to get zero defects first, these are the things you need to do, and then a handoff to production. So this is the endemic problem that I have seen in food manufacturing or food packaging, the design getting released to manufacturing where it's really not ready yet, but manufacturing is stuck with it. Just go on here. This is the process review of the process flow, HACCP PFMEA, into the control plan, into the standardization. Okay, what I mentioned to you, this is something we train teams in and work with them to look at this historical information, looking at food safety issues we have had with the consumer, food safety issues we have had inside the organization, quality issues we have had with the consumer, quality issues inside the organization, including the suppliers. We do a Pareto and we bring it in as failure modes into the HACCP PFMEA to identify how to control these from escaping or occurring in our organization. Move on. What is the benefit of this advanced planning, quality planning? The idea of, we say spend upfront money. That's the red. If you spend the upfront money, you won't be, wasting money on drastic designer changes or product recall. Okay, so in the blue, what you're seeing is product recall and major issues, because you had either quality issues or food safety issues. And of course, the one thing that can put you out of business is food safety issues. And the idea is of doing this advanced planning is that you can see here the area under the curve, or the time and dollars spent after product release, is much less if you do this advanced quality planning. So the idea that as a reject goes from concept into the plan, to the detailed design, to build, to test, to production, to the customer, costs go up another 10 times. And it becomes very expensive every time we don't catch problems up early. That's the concept here. And then along with this is the 8-discipline problem-solving process used by the best organizations in the world. And understanding that root causes are 3 types of root causes, that when you have a problem, whether it's a food safety problem or a quality problem, something made it occur. Then you have to ask yourself, I've got all these controls in place, what made it escape? So it's an escape root cause, occur root cause, and then you have to ask the question, why is it in my system from the first place? And you come up with a system root cause. So 3 types of root causes in an 8-step discipline process. So APQP, HACCP, our process review with the HACCP PFMEA and the control plan, and the 8D problem solving is what we recommend for, going to zero defects. Folks, one more thing you have to have in place is when you have problems, which is what we call defect detection, you have to take it into prevention by taking it into the HACCP PFMEA, because most of us do family of products. When you do family of products, you have to make sure the lessons learned are transferred into the new product. All right. The next best-in-class area that we're going to touch upon is enterprise performance measurement, which is the KPIs. These KPIs are key measurables And there are key measurables every organizations have, which are vital few measurables that measure the pulse of the organization. And then you have the processes that you can control and the process measurable. So there's a cause and effect relationship between performance indicators like KPIs, things like sales, parts per million defects, or food safety issues. Or let's say on-time delivery, warehouse inventory, sales. These are all key measurables, which are result measurables, but you cannot change results, folks. Only thing you can change and manage are processes and process measurables. So what do? You have to have this business operating system does an alignment between the KPIs and the key processes and process measures. What is the input? Context, interested party expectations, identifying the goals and objectives of the organization, along with the food food safety objectives and the quality objectives, which are organizational objectives. Okay, these are the intended results. And of course, in our discipline process that we have implemented in many organizations, you got to do monthly reviews using trend charts telling you where you are monthly, your goal line, and where you are. And how do you close the gap? You close the gap by identifying the improvement plans that affect the process KPI in the key process, which then affects the KPI that it affects. Sorry. So you got to improve the process KPI, which then improves the key process, which then affects the performance indicator or the result measurable above it, which then helps you meet your goals and objectives and your interested party expectations within the context of the business. That's the way to think about it. And you can see here from a high-level structure, it satisfies 4.1, 4.2, 9.3, 6.1, and 10.3. You can go look that up, folks. And then I feel remiss if I don't mention every opportunity I get. We very much believe in sustainability, and just to tell you, we have to go beyond zero defects here. Well, if you haven't gotten zero defects, do that first. For those of you who are there, you need to adopt a net zero, net positive. This is a methodology I wrote with Dr. Wayne Visser out of Oxford, one of the leading thinkers in sustainability. And this is about measuring 10 zeros, zero defects, zero accidents, all the way to zero corruption. It's a whole nother paper, whole nother presentation, and a whole other thought of integration of quality, environmental, health and safety, food safety, sustainability, and social responsibility. Folks, this is the last section in this presentation on the integration of quality and food safety, and the concept that today, if we don't implement electronic workflows, we are going to be left behind. That best-in-class organizations are trying to implement these electronic workflows that help you satisfy, your integrated management systems. So electronic workflows are software processes that enforce standardization in the organization. So you can have, integrated management systems functionality. So electronic workflows will help you do food safety, quality, and in that, it should help you do that APQP process that I talked to you about, okay? And these processes need to help you control even your suppliers. So here are some processes in a high-level structure. These are the 3, 6, 8, 10, 16 processes in your quiver of processes, which can be implemented with electronic workflows and really will help you implement the high-level structure or help you implement FSSC 22000 and ISO 9001 in an integrated fashion. So there are folks out there, including Omnex, that have Enterprise Integrated Management System Suite. There's a second suite for the APQP, the FMEA, the integrated HACCP that you can implement for zero defects. And then third, very importantly, is the supply chain, okay? And that is really what this presentation is about. So let me then summarize this presentation, which is a two-part presentation that started with explaining FSSC 22000 and FSSC 22000Q in part A, and in the part B, where it's talking about best-in-class systems. So let's summarize. IMS is made up of integrated processes, integrated risk, integrated audits. It's a takeaway, folks. It's not just integrated processes. It's also risk and audits. Second, integration is focused on integrated management systems, including different management systems. Okay, and you can go beyond EMS if you'd or QMS if you'd like with FSMS or food safety and quality. You could include environmental management systems 14001, health and safety, that's occupational health and safety, ISO 45001, IT security 27001, and social responsibility. I can't say ISO 26000, but it's a guidance standard you can use. All right, third bullet. Standardization is as important as integration. I hope you understand that. Having common processes globally is key. Number 4, best-in-class systems have integrated processes, risk, and audits. It includes integration and standardization. That's point 2. Third is to use this process review that Omnex calls, which is using teams off the shop floor around families of products or families of processes and doing a process flow, HACCP PFMEA, that's food safety and quality, and having integrated control plan, and then a shop floor standardization of work instructions, inspection sheets. And then as a separate process, discipline problem solving, which helps you do corrective action that the standard asks for. Both of these, I also talked about advanced quality planning that don't mention here, but those 3 things are what Omnex has used time and time again in our 33-year-old history to drive zero defects. Next, implementation of the business operating system, the key performance indicators that aligns results with objectives, with the context, interested party expectations, actually then the processes and the process measurables, okay? Those are the process measurables that you need in 4.4 of the process approach in measuring and controlling the processes of the organization. And lastly, folks, integrated management system software with electronic workflows. And I mentioned to you, typically people have 3 different suites. This is something Omnex also has in our software group called Omnex Systems, which is, enterprise-wide integrated management systems. So not only can you do quality and food safety, but you can do quality, food safety, environmental management systems, and so on. So if the developers of the electronic workflows are smart and thought it through, you're able to implement integrated management systems through these electronic workflows. So enterprise-wide integrated management systems. Number 2 is the new product development, advanced quality planning, and this HACCP PFMEA for the integrated risk, That's the second suite. And the third suite is managing the suppliers. Managing suppliers are very key. The higher risk you have in the supply chain, the more you need that. And with that, folks, this is the webinar and presentation on FSSC 22000, integrating food safety with quality. I want to thank Exemplar for giving me this opportunity to share this presentation with all of you. I hope you all enjoyed this presentation and hope you were able to learn a lot from this. And folks, for Omnex and myself, Chad Kymal, I want to thank you very much. Thank you, folks.
And thank you, Chad Kymal, for that excellent presentation and that deep dive into integrated food safety standards, how they integrate with management standards as well. And that concludes this presentation.